My name is Nova Ryland, 28 years old. The contract weighed almost nothing, just 6 clipped pages warm from the printer, but it felt like a skyscraper in my hands. Outside the tower, Denver had rinsed itself in evening. Sidewalks slick from a brief storm, and neon signs smeared into the pavement like watercolors. The air sharp with cold and the faint, clean bite of snow from the mountains. I pressed the folder to my chest and told myself, you did it. 10 million. Not a fantasy number, not a pitch deck hallucination, inked digits tied to my algorithm, a medical diagnostic model that had crawled out of years of insomnia and stubbornness. I imagined how their faces would change when I told them, my parents, my sister, like light coming on in a room that's been dim for years. I drove the suburban route home with my window cracked and the folder buckled in the passenger seat like a seat-belted child. It felt good to rehearse the reveal. I'd hold the contract up, there'd be stunned silence, then laughter, a celebratory dinner we'd talk about for years. The house greeted me with its ordinary yellow glow. I stepped into the kitchen and stopped. My sister sat at the table, posture perfect, a latte cooling at her right hand, her phone face down on a napkin like it had been told to behave. 32, our company's project manager, always composed, always 10 steps ahead in appearance, if not in code. I did it, I said, lifting the folder like a trophy. 10 million for the algorithm. Something flickered across her face that wasn't surprise, not joy, not exactly. A twitch, then a stillness that ran the length of her shoulders. Your algorithm, she said. Her voice could have sliced a lemon in the dark. You mean the one I shepherded through every room where you wouldn't have been invited? The one I defended to legal when your documentation read like a manifesto? I laughed, thin and shaky. It's my code, you know that. And my stewardship. She rose, the chair scraping tile. There was coffee foam dried at the corner of her cup, like a smile that had hardened. You think the world runs on code alone? I set the folder down on the island, palms flat, the marble cold. This isn't about you. Oh, Nova. She came around the island until we were close enough to count each other's blinks. It's always been about you, the prodigy, the exception, the one who doesn't say hello because she's busy saving it all. I've always said hello, I murmured, which was ridiculous and true, and I never asked you to protect me. Then you're naive. Her breath touched my cheek. The board wants faces they can trust. Adults. If you knew what I've done to keep this alive. What you've done, I tried to smile. You sit in the meetings. I write the engine. We were already at the staircase without remembering deciding to move, the argument migrating through the house like a storm in search of a window to rattle. The banister was cool under my palm. The steps were polished, old wood with a habit of confessing your weight. We stood there, eye to eye. Somewhere in the living room, the TV muttered to itself, laughter canned and looping. You're nothing without me, she said, the syllables too soft to be a shout and somehow crueler for it. In the breath that followed, I saw something brief. Her mouth pulled tight in doubt, a private flinch, then hands on my shoulders, a push that was either calculated or desperate or both. My heel hunted for the stair and found air. The world titled. I remember the ceiling like a fast-moving sky, the picture frames on the wall making faces as I fell. Then wood, beating the breath from my body, and finally the surprise of the floor when it arrived, white and empty. Beeping tethered me back. A hospital room, washed in the exhausted blue of near morning. A plastic taste in my mouth, a canyon in my leg where pain lived and sang. The nurse leaning over me had the kind of eyes that make bad news tolerable. You're awake, she said, like a wish fulfilled. Can you tell me your name? Nova, I croaked. How long? 2 weeks, she said, soft as pulling a sheet over a sleeping child. You were in a coma. My throat hurt in all the places words pass. My family? She glanced at the door, at the vase of chrysanthemums on the sill with a tag that read to Nora, "Get well soon," in a careful, unfamiliar hand. Your parents called, early on, she said. Neutral, trained. No visits. Your sister hasn't been in. The word sister fell like a scalpel. Did they say anything? I asked. Anything at all? Her silence was a kind of answer. Rest, she said finally. We'll get you stronger. The room learned me as the days stretched. IV clicks, the drip's exact patience, the square of sun that inched from the foot of the bed to the cupboard and back. No footsteps I knew, No mother's purse hitting the chair, no father's throat clearing to fill the air. A phlebotomist with music in his earbuds apologized for cold hands. A tech taped a fresh name label to my chart and smoothed it with more care than anyone had smoothed my hair in years. Once, through the not quite closed door, I heard two voices lower than whispers. "External request again?" one said. "Came through legal," the other replied. "It's odd. Someone keeps asking for updated neurologic assessments. Not standard for this wing. Name on it?" "A. Rowan," came the answer. Pen scratching. A shrug, only a sound makes. "Probably nothing." Later, when a transport aide wheeled me to imaging, I saw it myself. A photocopied transfer slip clipped under my chart, the corner annotated with a tidy handwritten A. Rowan, the R looped like ribbon. It meant nothing then. It meant everything later. No one came. I watched the door the way you watch a horizon for ships that never arrive. The chrysanthemums slumped day by day, their petals loosening into the vase water like promises shedding themselves. On day 5, my counting, not theirs, my sister appeared. She kept her coat on. Her eyes did their quick inventory, the machines, the bruise at my temple, the angle of my leg in its rig. "Still clinging to life?" she asked. If she meant it as a joke, it had been filed under the wrong label. "Why are you here?" My voice was hoarse but stable, like a bridge that shouldn't hold and does. "To make sure you stay out of the way," she said, almost gently. "The contract's moving forward." "My contract." "Our company's," she corrected. "Someone has to be the adult." "You pushed me," I said, "because truth is a dog that will sit until you feed it, and then it will bark." She didn't flinch. She didn't confess either. "You shouldn't have come at me on the stairs," she said, like she was telling me how to fold a shirt. "You lose control of the narrative when you escalate." "The narrative," I repeated, as if it were a pastry we were sharing. "The judge will decide you're not ready. It's kinder than letting you ruin yourself." She glanced toward the hall, as if time owed her a meeting. "Get rest," she said, stealing the nurse's line, and left. Her perfume lingered, a high, cold scent that made the room feel smaller. I reached for my phone like a person reaches for a railing seconds too late. The screen glowed, unread messages from a handful of colleagues, a long one from my best friend I couldn't process yet. I opened the banking app to at least make myself the author of a small act. Pay a bill, move money, prove my hands still move the world in definite ways. The alert was red and precise, account frozen. I called the bank. My name sounded foreign in my own mouth. "I can't access my funds," I said. "There must be a mistake." The representative's voice clicked between polite and pitying. "There is a court order, Ms. Ryland. It cites concerns about your capacity to manage assets." "Capacity," I repeated, the word hollowing as it echoed. "I'm awake. I'm speaking to you." "It was filed with medical documentation," she said. "I'm not permitted to discuss details. I'm sorry." When the call ended, the beep of the heart monitor seemed louder, smug almost, as if the machine thought it knew better than I did what was happening to me. I stared at the wrong name on the flower tag until the letters blurred. The nurse came to check vitals. Gentle hands, steady face. "Is there someone I can call?" she asked. "Yes," I said, because there had to be. There's someone. She adjusted the sheet, glanced at the chart, at the clipped slip with that looping initial like a signature on the corner of a secret. "You're strong," she said, and I wanted so much to believe that strength mattered when paper didn't believe in you. Night came as if it had all day been inside the walls and only now remembered how to show itself. The window's rectangle turned to a well. In the glass I could see myself, hair matted in a halo that wasn't holy, eyes too bright with the kind of alertness pain brings. Somewhere in this city, my 10 million sat in a locked box my own name couldn't open. Somewhere, people who shared my last name were telling themselves a story where they were good, and I was a problem to be solved kindly. I closed my eyes and saw again the staircase, the palm, the hesitation like a bird in my sister's chest, unsure whether to stay or fly. I saw the corner of the slip. A. Rowan. I didn't know who she was. I did know this. Someone had already decided to write my future in a font that wasn't mine. I pressed my fingers against the call button and then didn't. Instead, I reached for my phone, opened my friend's message, and began to read. By morning, I would have a name for what this was. For now, I had a feeling, a thread pulled tight from my heart to the courthouse. The message from my best friend was short but trembling at the edges, like it had been typed fast and deleted twice before sending. Nova, I've been trying to reach you for days. Something's wrong. Call me as soon as you can. Her name, Cynthia, glowed on my screen like a lifeline. I hit dial before I could second guess it. She answered in one breath. Thank God. You're alive. Barely, I said, forcing a weak laugh. What's going on? Silence hummed for a heartbeat. Then, your sister's been telling everyone at work you're not coming back, that the company's reassigning your project, your algorithm, to her. My stomach tightened. She can't do that. She already has. There's a memo circulating with her name listed as lead developer. She's claiming you're incapacitated. Nova, she even brought in someone from legal, your parents' attorney, I think, to validate it. The same cold word the banker had used, incapacitated. I thanked Cynthia and promised to call back. When the call ended, I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the fluorescent hums between heartbeats. Someone wasn't just rewriting my story, they were erasing it line by line. 2 days later, a man in a gray suit appeared at my door. He introduced himself as Daniel Cross, attorney. Mid-30s, calm voice, eyes that moved like they cataloged everything. I was contacted by someone at your firm, he said, settling into the chair beside my bed. They were worried about irregular filings involving your intellectual property. I looked into it. He slid a folder across the blanket. Legal forms. My name printed cleanly at the bottom, my signature a perfect forgery. These declare you mentally unfit to manage assets and assign your corporate rights to a temporary custodian, your sister. I ran a trembling finger over the blue stamp. I never signed this. I know, Daniel said evenly, but the filings went through fast. Too fast. Someone used your hospital records to justify them. My records? He nodded. They attach medical evidence suggesting severe neurological impairment. Except those entries don't match your actual chart. That was when the doctor entered. She was in her 40s, steady posture, the kind of calm that made bad news sound like instructions for a recipe. I'm Dr. Price, she said. I oversaw your care after the fall, and I noticed something disturbing. Your medical file was altered. She opened her tablet, scrolling. See this note? It claims you required extended sedation and displayed minimal neurological response. None of that is true. Someone added these entries after you were admitted. The room spun. Why would anyone do that? To justify those legal filings, Daniel said. If a court believes you're non-responsive, they can freeze your assets. Dr. Price met my gaze. I've already reported the discrepancies to the hospital board, but I'll need your consent to release full copies. I want to make sure this never happens again. I nodded, words jammed behind the surge of anger swelling in my throat. That night, sleep refused to visit. I lay in the hospital dark, watching the red blink of the monitor, listening to the rain whisper at the window. My family had always been complicated, love traded like a currency, but this was something else. This was a ledger written in betrayal. Memories came like sharp glass. My sister at 6, yanking my favorite doll and calling it sharing. At 10, turning our parents against me over a broken vase she'd knocked off herself. At 17, whispering that I'd copied her college essay, and they'd believed her, every time. Now she'd graduated to forging my future. The next morning, Daniel returned with a quiet urgency. I found a trail, he said. A limited liability company registered 2 weeks after your accident, Rowan Care Services, LLC. It processed the payment for the external medical consultation that backed the court order. Rowan, the name from the transfer slip. Who owns it? It's hard to tell, he said. The registration lists an agent named Astra Rowan. No clear ties to your sister yet, but the timing's surgical. I could almost taste the word. Surgical. Precise, deliberate, clean on paper, but dripping in motive. Daniel leaned forward. Nova, if you want to fight this, we need evidence. Real evidence. And since Colorado is a one-party consent state, you can legally record a conversation without her permission. My pulse steadied. You're suggesting I talk to her. I'm suggesting you let her talk to you, he corrected. People who steal always want to be heard. Hours later, I was signing discharge papers against medical advice. Dr. Price frowned, but didn't stop me. Just promise me you'll be careful, she said. And take this. She handed me a flash drive. Full copies of your authentic records. Date stamped. If anything happens, these prove your chart was tampered with. Her kindness cracked something in me I hadn't realized was brittle. I thanked her, tucking the drive into my jacket pocket beside the small digital recorder Daniel had given me. By sunset, I was limping through the drizzle toward a downtown cafe that smelled of espresso and wet wool. My sister was already there, pristine as ever, stirring her coffee like it owed her an apology. She looked up, feigned surprise. "You're up and walking." "Mostly." I slid into the chair opposite her, keeping my bag between us. The recorder blinked once, red and patient. "So," she said, lips curving, "the contract's moving forward. Someone had to keep the momentum while you were recovering." "You mean my contract," I said. She laughed, a thin metallic sound. "You weren't exactly in shape to handle it. The company needs results." "You mean you need recognition?" Her eyes narrowed. "You always make it about ego. I kept your project alive. Without me, it would have been shelved." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "You forged my signature." Her smile didn't falter, but her fingers stilled around the spoon. "Careful with accusations, Nova. You don't look well enough for court." "I look well enough to remember being pushed down a staircase," I said. That pierced something. Her jaw tensed, then loosened. "You tripped." The recorder caught every syllable. We stared at each other, silence spreading like spilled ink between us. Finally she stood, smoothed her blazer, and said quietly, "You should thank me. I'm the reason your name's still on the product at all." Then she left. Her perfume, a glacial sweetness, trailed behind her as the door swung shut. I waited 5 breaths before exhaling. My hand shook as I turned off the recorder. One conversation down, a mountain of lies to climb. Back in my temporary apartment that night, Daniel introduced me to a private investigator he trusted, a woman in her late 30s named Maeve Chen, sharp eyes, hair tied back with ruthless precision. "I've been digging," she said, spreading documents on the coffee table. "Your sister's bank records show multiple transfers to one of your colleagues, Mark Evers. He's been altering internal files to make her look like the lead architect." The proof was neat, brutal. Timestamps, account numbers, the paper trail of deceit. Maeve tapped another document. "And here's the kicker. Payments began the day after your accident." I sat back, breath shallow. She didn't even wait. "People rarely do," Maeve said. "She assumed you'd never wake up." Her words struck harder than any fall. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Cynthia again. "You need to see this," she said, forwarding a chain of company emails. In one, my sister wrote, "With Nova incapacitated, I'll take full responsibility for the AI initiative. The contract's in safe hands." Another, "Legal is finalizing asset control. I'll sign the paperwork tomorrow." I scrolled through them, each line a blade. "She's rewriting history," I whispered. "Not for long," Cynthia said. "We've got your back." But loyalty couldn't fix what was broken. I had proof, yes, but proof needed light, and light always burned before it healed. Before dawn, I called the hospital's administration office, my voice steadier than I felt. The director, a clipped woman with the cadence of someone used to crisis, confirmed what I already feared. "There were unauthorized alterations to your file," she said. "Entries exaggerating your condition. We're investigating, but the access request came through a verified legal channel. We're trying to trace who initiated it." "Do you have a name?" A pause, then, "The documentation references Rowan Care Services, LLC. That's all I can tell you right now." The same phantom name again. I hung up, staring out the window as dawn broke, thin gray light crawling across Denver's rooftops. Somewhere beyond those streets, my family was sitting down to breakfast, planning their next step as if I were already erased. But they'd made one mistake. They'd left me alive, and I was done being their ghost. By the time the sun fully rose, Denver was gray and humming. Cars sliding past puddles, people moving fast enough to forget each other. I sat in my small apartment, every surface covered with papers, legal forms, screenshots, hospital documents, printouts of emails Cynthia had sent overnight. The smell of burnt toast lingered. I'd tried to eat, failed. Daniel stood by the window, arms folded. His tie hung loose, his expression carved from exhaustion. "We're ready," he said. "We file today." Maeve, the investigator, paced near the table, her boots tapping out an impatient rhythm. "The evidence is solid. Wire transfers, altered metadata, internal memos. She can't bury this." "She'll try," I said quietly. "She always does." I looked down at the USB drive Dr. Price had given me, my medical truth in digital form, and next to it, the small recorder. A red light blinked once before fading, as if reminding me it had done its job. "This isn't just about a contract anymore," Daniel said. "She and whoever helped her committed fraud, and those forged medical records make it conspiracy." "Meaning prison time," Maeve added, matter of fact. I nodded, but inside I wasn't celebrating. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like walking barefoot through glass to reclaim something I'd built with my own hands. I reached for my phone. The hospital administrator had left a voicemail while I slept. I played it on speaker. Ms. Ryland, this is Dr. Becker from Administrative Review. Our audit confirmed your chart was accessed multiple times from an external legal account. We traced the authorization back to Rowan Care Services, LLC. The system log shows their liaison entered the record room in person 2 days after your accident. The name on file, Astra Rowan. We're turning this over to our legal department. Rowan again. That ghost of a name now had a first. Daniel frowned. Astra Rowan, that's not a random shell. Someone paid her. Maeve picked up the clue instantly. She's the missing link between your family's lawyer and the hospital. We'll find her. She was gone before I could answer, already making calls as she disappeared down the hallway. 2 weeks later, we were standing in the marble lobby of the Denver courthouse, the sound of heels on stone, the chill of bureaucracy. My leg was stronger now. I could walk without the crutches, though the limp stayed like a scar that refused to fade. Daniel carried our case file in one hand and the recorder in the other. You sure you're ready? He asked. Ready enough, I said. The filing clerk took the documents, stamped them with mechanical indifference, and handed me the receipt. Just like that, it was official. My sister would be served within the hour. When we stepped back outside, the air smelled of rain and gasoline. For the first time in weeks, I felt oxygen reach my lungs properly. Now we wait for her response, Daniel said, and we prepare. Prepare for what? For a fight, he said, one that's about to get ugly. The next morning, Maeve showed up at my door, her expression unreadable, but her eyes alight with something fierce. I found her, she said, Astra Rowan. I let her in, my pulse climbing. Who is she? She's a former administrative consultant for St. Augustine Medical, contracted to handle patient record transfers for legal continuity. Maeve dropped a folder on the table. Except the company that hired her, Rowan Care Services, was funded entirely by a single investor, your father. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. My father? Yep. Payments came from one of his holding accounts labeled Emergency Family Asset Management. It's been dormant for years, until the week after your accident. I swallowed hard. So he's the one who accessed my medical records? Indirectly, Maeve said. He paid Astra to do it. She believed she was acting under power of attorney, something he claimed you'd signed before your accident. I felt the air leave my chest. I never signed anything. I know, she said softly. That's the point. Daniel arrived minutes later. Maeve spread the documents out. Payment transfers, dated correspondence, Astra's digital signature, a letterhead bearing my father's business logo. Daniel exhaled slowly. This changes the scope. It's not just your sister anymore. Your parents are implicated. The thought made my stomach turn. No, I said instinctively. He wouldn't. But even as I said it, I heard the echo of every moment he'd chosen her over me. The way he'd call her our family's future at dinner parties. The way my mother would smile like that settled the matter. Daniel's voice broke through. Nova, this is important. If your father orchestrated the access, it could explain how your sister got the forged documents so quickly. He gave her the key. My fingers tightened around the USB drive until its edges bit into my palm. Then we take them all to court. He hesitated. Are you sure? Going after your entire family? They already went after me, I said. The hearing date came faster than I expected. The courtroom was smaller than it looked on TV, tighter, more intimate, like a stage built for truth and humiliation. My sister sat at the defense table in a pale gray suit, her hair perfectly straightened, her expression unreadable. My parents sat behind her, side by side, the picture of controlled concern. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father did, for 1 second, and I saw it. Fear, not guilt. The fear of a man who'd spent his life managing every narrative, now watching one spiral out of his control. Daniel leaned close. Remember, he whispered, stay composed. We have the facts. I nodded, hands trembling under the table. The judge entered, gavel struck, introductions made. Daniel rose to present our case. His voice was clear, deliberate, a scalpel of calm precision. Your Honor, this is not merely a dispute over intellectual property. It is a case of deliberate deception, an attempt to erase a living person from her own creation. He queued up the audio recording. The cafe chatter filled the room, followed by my sister's voice. The contract's moving forward. Someone had to step up since you're indisposed. Then the damning line, it's mine now. Gasps rippled through the gallery. My sister's face didn't move, but her hands clasped tighter. Daniel proceeded with the forged medical entries, Dr. Price's affidavit, and the bank records linking her to Mark Evers. Each piece clicked into place like gears turning toward justice. Finally, Maeve took the stand. She detailed the investigation, laying out how Rowan Care Services LLC was created, who funded it, and how it accessed the hospital system. When she named my father, a sound escaped my mother, a soft, broken gasp. My father's jaw set, his gaze dropping to the table. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Ryland, did you authorize these actions?" He hesitated. The courtroom waited. Then he nodded once. "I did." A wave of murmurs rose. He cleared his throat. "I thought she might never recover. I wanted to protect the family's assets, to hold them in trust until she could prove she was ready. I didn't know." "That your daughter would wake up?" Daniel cut in. "Or that your other daughter would exploit your decision to steal from her?" My father's voice broke. "I was trying to keep everything together." "And instead," Daniel said, "you tore it apart." The silence that followed was heavy, absolute. My sister looked at him, not angry, not sorry, but betrayed in her own way. They'd each used the other, and now both stood exposed. The judge called for a recess, but I stayed seated, my eyes locked on the family I used to call mine. When the bailiff finally cleared the room, my father turned slightly toward me. "Nova," he said quietly, "I never meant for it to go this far." I met his gaze. "You never meant for me to matter." He flinched like I'd hit him. I stood, legs stiff, heart steady. This was the beginning of the end, the moment the narrative changed hands. Outside, the Denver sky was fractured with sunlight through clouds, the kind that made glass towers look like mirrors. I caught my reflection in the courthouse doors, bandaged but standing, bruised but unbroken. The fight wasn't over. The verdict hadn't come yet. But for the first time, I knew exactly who I was fighting for. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed like a hive before a storm. Reporters lined the hallway, flashes going off as lawyers and witnesses shuffled through security. I gripped the railing, my leg aching with every step, and tried not to think about how much of my life had been decided in rooms like this, where power wore tailored suits and truth had to fight for a seat. Daniel met me outside the courtroom doors, a stack of exhibits under his arm. "We have one surprise witness left," he said quietly. "Astra Rowan." The name hit like a cold wind. "She's here?" "She contacted Maeve last night," he said. "Said she wanted to clear her conscience before the ruling. She claims she was misled, that your father told her he had full authority." I looked past him through the glass. Inside, my sister sat perfectly composed at the defense table, her hair pinned back, her silver pen tapping a steady rhythm against her legal pad. My parents sat a few rows behind, small against the oak paneling, looking like they'd aged years in a week. My mother's hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. When the judge entered, silence fell. The gavel's crack echoed like thunder against stone. "Court is in session," she said. "Mr. Cross, you may proceed." Daniel called Astra Rowan to the stand. The door opened, and a woman in her 50s stepped forward, her presence calm but tense. She wore a navy coat and a thin silver cuff around her wrist, the same one I'd seen in that security still. My father stiffened as she passed him, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Ms. Rowan," Daniel began, "can you explain your involvement in this matter?" She nodded once. "I was contracted by an entity called Rowan Care Services LLC to review and transmit medical records to a legal team representing the Ryland family. The payment came through a private account connected to Mr. Ryland." "Did you know those records were being altered?" "No." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't flinch. "I was told it was a preservation order, standard procedure when a family member is incapacitated. It wasn't until I saw the public filings later that I realized what had been done in my name." "And who gave you those instructions?" Astra hesitated, then turned her gaze toward my father. "He did. He said it was temporary, that he needed to protect his daughter's interests until she recovered." The courtroom held its breath. My father's shoulders sagged under the weight of her words. Daniel leaned in slightly. "Did he mention which daughter?" Astra's throat worked before she spoke. "Yes. He said the older one, Serena, would take over temporarily. That Nova wasn't stable enough to handle the responsibility." Every word landed like a strike. I could feel my sister's stare from across the room, sharp enough to cut. "Ms. Rowan," Daniel said, "why are you testifying today?" She exhaled shakily. "Because I was wrong. Because I let money and fear convince me to look away. And because Ms. Ryland deserves her name back." Daniel nodded, thanking her softly before sitting. When it was my father's turn to testify, the air felt thick. He walked to the stand slowly, his confident stride replaced by something brittle. "Mr. Ryland," Daniel said, "did you instruct Ms. Rowan to access your daughter's medical files?" My father swallowed. "I did." "Why?" His voice cracked. "Because I thought she might not wake up. And if she did, I wanted her to have a business left to come back to. I thought Serena could hold it together. I never expected her to—" "To push me down a staircase," I said before I could stop myself. The judge shot me a warning glance, but didn't silence me. My father looked like he'd been punched. "Nova," he said, voice low. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." I laughed once, a hollow sound. "It never was." Daniel rose again. "Your Honor, the evidence shows deliberate deceit, forged signatures, falsified medical records, and financial transfers to conceal the theft of Ms. Ryland's intellectual property. Whether the motive was greed or misguided protection, the law makes no distinction." The defense attorney, my sisters, stood next, her tone icy. "My client acted in good faith to protect the company during a crisis. She did not alter medical records, and she did not intend harm. Any mistakes made by her father or external contractors were beyond her control." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then how do you explain the recorded conversation where she admits, and I quote, 'It's mine now'?" The attorney hesitated. My sister's expression didn't break, but I saw her throat tighten, a quick, involuntary swallow. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Ryland," she said to Serena, "you may testify." Serena stood, smoothing her suit jacket. "Yes, Your Honor." Her heels clicked against the tile as she took the stand. The room felt colder somehow. "I didn't steal anything," she began. "I stepped up. Nova created something incredible, but she's always been impulsive, obsessive. I watched her drive herself to exhaustion for years. When she fell, I thought, maybe this was my chance to prove I could keep things running until she recovered. Dad told me he'd taken care of the legal side, so I trusted him." "Then why forge her signature?" Daniel asked. She blinked, faltered, then regrouped. "It wasn't a forgery. It was an authorization he'd already drafted. I just submitted it," Daniel finished for her. Her jaw tightened. "Yes." He nodded. "And when your sister woke up, why didn't you correct the record?" She didn't answer right away, because I knew she'd destroy everything trying to make it right. The silence that followed was unbearable. My father's eyes were closed. My mother was crying quietly into her hands. The judge finally spoke. "We've heard enough." Everyone stood as she left to deliberate. The murmurs rose immediately, lawyers whispering, pens clicking, tension buzzing under fluorescent light. I stayed seated, staring at the grain of the table until it blurred. Then, after what felt like forever, the judge returned. She looked directly at me. "Ms. Ryland, the court finds in your favor. The evidence demonstrates a coordinated effort to defraud you of your intellectual property and assets. The defendants, Serena Ryland and Mark Evers, are guilty of fraud and conspiracy." The words rang in my chest like a bell. The judge turned to my sister. "You are hereby sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of $200,000. Serena's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't look at me. "Mark Evers," the judge continued, 2 years in prison and a $20,000 fine. Mark slumped, his lawyer whispering in his ear. Then she looked at my parents. "As for Mr. and Mrs. Ryland, though not directly involved in the fraudulent acts, your complicity in enabling them warrants civil damages. You are to pay $75,000 to the plaintiff for emotional and reputational harm." My mother gasped. My father simply nodded, face drained of color. When the gavel fell, the room didn't erupt. It exhaled. Reporters surged forward, flashes slicing through the air. Daniel placed a steady hand on my shoulder, but I couldn't move. My sister was being led away in handcuffs, her silver pen confiscated, her eyes hollow. My parents stood frozen, their empire of control finally crumbling. I turned and walked out before anyone could speak to me. The courthouse steps were wet with rain. The sky was pale gold, trembling with late afternoon light. Daniel caught up beside me. "It's over," he said softly. I shook my head. "No, it's just different now." We stood there for a long moment, watching the traffic crawl through downtown. Then I said, "Help me set up the foundation paperwork. I want to start something, a fund for people who've been betrayed by their own families." He nodded slowly. "You sure?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady for the first time in months. "They tried to erase me. I'll use that to help people write themselves back in." Above us, the courthouse flag snapped in the wind. Justice wasn't clean, but it was done. And for the first time, I felt something close to peace.